Another one of Poe's works, the short story, The Telltale Heart, is a story of a man's guilt. And it is because of this man's guilt that he has to suffer, and he has to understand the moral consequences of his actions for killing an individual who simply just had what was a very unstable and uncouth mutation. I grew up listening to short stories read on the radio by Edgar Allan Poe, but before that, they were given to me by my dear mother, whom I miss, and hope that did not make it down here with me. She was a strict woman, and it was a shame when I had to add her to her world-famous jambalaya. Allow me to go ahead and play some ambience here. We'll just open the window to hell outside for you all, and we will read The Telltale Heart for you all. So, one moment. Wonderful sound outside. Magnificent. Home sweet hell. Now, where were we? True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in earth, and heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible how the first idea entered my brain, but once conceived it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. Love the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of that eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently. And then, when I had made the opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, you see. Oh, so slowly, so very slowly, that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon that wretched vulture eye, and this I did for 7 long nights, every night, just as midnight, but I found the eye was always closed, so it was impossible for me to do the work, for it was not the old man who vexed me, oh no, my dear, but his evil eye. And every morning, when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he'd passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man, indeed to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in the opening of the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before the night I had felt the extent of my own powers, of my own sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph to think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he did not even dream of the secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on his bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, for the shutters were closed and fastened through fear of robbers. So I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in his bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For the whole hour I did not move a muscle. In the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting on that bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death that watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of a mortal terror. It was not the groan of pain or of grief, oh no. It was a low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it was welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo. The terrors that distracted me, I say I knew it well. I knew it when the old man felt, and pitied him. Although I chuckled at heart, I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise. When he had turned in the bed, his fears had ever been since growing upon him. He said he'd been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only the mouse crossing the floor. Or it is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he's been trying to comfort himself with those suppositions, but he has found all in vain. All in vain, I tell you. All in vain! Because death, in approaching him, had stalked with the black shadow before him, and enveloped the victim. It was a mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he never saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a long time very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved myself. A very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice and fell upon the vulture eye. It was open. Wide open. And I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with a hideous veil that was over the chill to the very marrow of my bones. But I could not see nothing else in that old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray as if by instinct, precisely on that damned spot. And now, I have not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over an acuteness of the senses. Now, I say, there came into my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as if the beating of the drum stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous, so I am. And now at the dead hour of the night, Amid the dreadful silence of that wretched old house, I so strange a noise that they excited to the uncontrollable terror. And yet, some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder, louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now an anxiety seized me. The sound you would have heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw upon the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once, and once only. In an instant I dragged him to the floor and put the heavy bed over him. Then I smiled gaily to find the deed so far done, but for many minutes the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me, nor would it not be heard through the wall. At the length it ceased, the old man was finally dead. I had removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there for many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you would think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the heads, the arms, and the legs. Then I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited it all between the scattings. Then I replaced the board so cunningly that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to watch out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I'd far been too wary for that. The top had caught all. When I had made an end to these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight, as the bell sounded the hour. There came a knocking at the street door. I went down and opened it with a light heart, for what now had I to fear? They entered three men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night, suspicion of foul play that had been aroused, information that had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what did I have to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome, and shriek, I said, was in my own dream. The man I mentioned was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search, and search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed him his treasures, secure and undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot from which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things, but ere long I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but they still sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued to become more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued to gain definitiveness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. And what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much like the sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I aroused, argued about trifles in a high key with violent gesticulations, and the voice steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury the observations of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung a chair upon which I had been sitting, and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose louder and louder all over, continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and louder. And still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible that they heard not? Almighty God, no, they heard. They suspected. They knew. They knew, and they were making a mockery of my horror. It was as I thought and I think, but anything was better than this agony. Anything was better and more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder, 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 louder. The ends! I shrieked. Disassemble them, why admit the deed? Tear up the planks. Here's the beating of it in your heart. Well, I love that story.